What's up, Rockstars? Today I am reviewing Townsfolk Tussle for you. Now, there will be a link below to the Kickstarter because it is live today at the time that I'm posting this. But first, I'm going to tell you what I think about the game. All the good, all the bad, all the great, all the not so great. We're going to do that right now. So let's get to it. As always, I'd like to start out with a quick thank you to my patrons and YouTube members. It is through their financial support that I'm able to give this honest opinion, that I can just be completely honest and not care about being paid by game companies. Nobody pays me, nothing, except you guys. You guys support and make this channel what it is, so thank you for that. If you're not a member of that and you want to be, link down below in the description. If you don't, that's fine too. Just a simple like or a comment or a share or anything like that is huge and helps a lot. So be sure to subscribe for more stuff just like this. Let's get to it. Now, I want to start out by saying that obviously this is a prototype, and so it was sent to me for free. So I did get this. I mean, obviously I didn't pay for a prototype. That'd be silly. But they didn't pay me at all. But I did get this so that I can give you my opinion on it during the Kickstarter when they're asking for money. So I hope that's very helpful for you. That being said, because it's a prototype, I'm not going to comment too much on the component quality at all. I'll do that in my final review of the game once it actually delivers to all of us, if it successfully funds and delivers and all that kind of stuff. I'm also not going to explain the game too much. There are other channels that do that much better than me. The campaign page, I'm sure, does a much better job than I do. So again, if you're curious about necessarily how it plays more specifically, you can head there. In fact, they might even have a rulebook posted. I imagine they do, because they also have this on Tabletop Simulator. What I am going to do is do a quick overview, like very quick, just so you have the basics, so that when I'm talking about these mechanics, you understand them. So I have these standees. You guys won't. You'll have miniatures. This is just to make the prototype cheaper. That's fine. That being said, they look really nice. You essentially are moving through either obstacles or features that either block your movement or affect your movement or your line of sight or various different things. The game is structured in kind of the shopping phase where you buy stuff. There'll be a whole bunch of items listed there, and you spend your gold coins to buy items there. And then the fighting phase where you fight the enemy based off of what it comes in. Now, they have different stuff here I'm going to talk about, different stuff here I'm going to talk about. And then, of course, you have your character cards with your equipment and whatnot. Very kind of a standard setup. It's nothing that's going to, like, come at you crazy. It's pretty basic and easy to understand. I'll explain the other stuff as I talk about the other stuff. So if I like a mechanic, I'll explain a mechanic. If I don't like a mechanic, I'll explain that mechanic. Okay, moving on. That's kind of the basic. You're shopping, you're fighting, and then you win after a while. I'm going to start out now with the rulebook as the start of the review, because that's really your first experience too. Obviously, in the final review, I'll talk about the unboxing experience, the storage, the components, all this stuff, because that's what you first interact with. But the next thing you're going to do is you're going to touch this rulebook and you're going to try and read it. Okay, so how is this rulebook? This rulebook is actually quite nice. As you can see, it goes through, various things. Like for a mostly, a simpler game, this actually does a great job of having tons of call-outs and labeling everything and talking about everything. It talks about it in a logical order, which is nice. There you can see some of the miniatures that you'll end up getting if you back the game. It comes with, 12 different bosses and 7 different heroes and all sorts of stuff like that. A little bit of story, and then they have this quick reference, which is kind of like an index, in that it's in alphabetical order. It lists more than one page sometimes, like for instance, naming a new sheriff is on 10 and 21, which is great. So not only does it have a good rule book, that's a positive, but it has an index. But the index could use some help. So for instance, if we look at winning the game, let's see where that is. Winning the game. Maybe the final fight, results maybe? No, where would winning the game be? Losing the game. Here, let's go to losing the game. Maybe that'll tell us how to win the game. Page 20. So we're going to go to page 20. On page 20, it says combat factors and victory. So this is really, how to win, right? But it also, it's listed as kind of how to lose, which is really right here. right? But the problem is, this says right here, players lose the game if all townsfolk are knocked out during a fight, or if all remaining townsfolk are removed from the board with no way to return. If this occurs, the game is over. Great, that's awesome. But again, an index needs to tell you everywhere something's mentioned, and there's more to it than losing a game. In fact, there's another way to lose the game, and you wouldn't know on this. In fact, just over here on page 201, luckily it's just right over here, it talks about the final fight and how the sheriff, if the sheriff dies in the final fight, you lose. So right here it says, let's see if I can even find where it says it. New sheriff in town. The position of sheriff is awarded to the townsfolk with the highest total feats of medal points, not just quantity of feats. They'll receive a unique piece of gear to aid them in the final fight. The other townsfolk will need to work together with their new symbol of justice. If the sheriff is knocked out during the final fight, they lose. That's not mentioned here. So really, winning and losing, or however it wants to word it, it needs to list both 20 and 21. So it still needs some work. This is not final. Of course, they have room to change it, but I just wanted to point that out there. I'm not going to mark it as a negative because it has an index, and this is a prototype. However, if that was the final review, I definitely would. So hopefully that gets fixed. I'm sure it will. They're good at communicating. All right, let's go ahead and move on from that. All right, now this is going to be a huge positive. I love this. I've only played a few other games that do this well. Titans was one of them, if you saw me review that. The game board itself includes a lot of reminders, which I really appreciate. So I'm going to take the sideboard here, which is separate because it's flippable from the two different phases. And it says here the town phase. And it says right here, receive 3 feats, resolve town events, shop here, enter the final phase, right? Or the final phase. Okay, that's great. And then down here it says 8 coins. That's been changed, by the way, since this has been sent to me. Reset the peddler cart before shopping. So you can just reset the board. Then you go out to the back and look at that. It has a fight phase and it has the final fight and, you know, the different stuff you can do there. It shows where the action and discard goes. It has the movement and health and stuff right there. That kind of stuff is really helpful. There's a whole space here to list all the terrain because each terrain, you know, the honeybee hive, as you can imagine, has a game effect if you're near it or interact with it in some way. But this right here tells you it's an obstacle and tells you right off the bat, if the townsfolk or ruffians start their turn adjacent to this, to take 1 damage, right? And it lists all of that here. That's really nice. It always has a turn order right here. It always tells you exactly who you're fighting and what they're doing right here. It has the grid lines right here for easy setup of all of these different features. All of that was really nice. It was very helpful, especially when first playing, to have those reminders. That is really, really helpful. These always were, 100% of the time, at least when I've played. And I really enjoyed having them right there with a place to put them. They're supposed to be there so that you always have that reminder. I think that's great. Will I need them overall? Not necessarily, though sometimes, depending on, you know, especially when these are miniatures, right? And these are taking up 4 spaces and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to see the options listed clearly without any obscuring of the features, because some of them can be kind of small, right? So that's kind of nice to have. All right, now another huge positive I have is the amount of gear that you have. This is very gear dependent. This isn't even all the gear. This isn't it. And this is before stretch goals or whatever, so you guys are online. Like, look at all of these items. This is huge. So the peddler has so many items. Each one of these is unique. Every single one. I've even checked to see if things have the same stats, but a different name or something like that. Sometimes we do that. Nothing. These are all unique. It's impressive. It really, really is. This is a ton of replay value. This is a ton of stuff to get through. And then there's, you know, special items and all sorts of stuff that you can do. You know, that you can get. You can get special items, you can get boss items, you can get shop items, you can unlock items. There's a ton of gear. Now, what's interesting about this, that I'm also going to tack onto this positive, is that you're constantly swapping gear. There are enemies that'll just take your gear. You'll just swap your gear. You've had this weapon the whole time. A good weapon shows up. Oh, I'm going to use this now. Now I'm a ranged guy because this is a great ranged weapon. So you're constantly shifting, either equipping or unequipping your gear. You can have like an unlimited amount of gear and you just have to pay to swap it, which is awesome. I love that. It means that I can have these weapons and I have to just kind of pick between them, or these consumables or whatever it might be. It's really, really cool, and I really enjoy the gear here. The unlocking of it, the using of it, the uniqueness of it. Each of the gears mostly has, you know, whatever it is, the different stats, stuff like that, and then the a little blurb on the bottom that it gives it something special, whether it's a gun that shoots slowly or whether it's something that you can actually use to buff yourself, but you can also choose to discard it and throw it at someone, or something that, it just makes you move faster plus gives you some defense, or whatever it might be. There's a ton of different features on each and every single one. Here's a hammer that does different stuff too. I'm going to talk about their gear in a little bit, so I'm not going to get too into it, but suffice it to say, there is a ton of gear. You're moving it around constantly, and it's really, really enjoyable. Okay, now before we get into some of the more variability of this game, I just want to say, blanket term, I really appreciated the humor that this game has. It's a very interesting world that seems really connected, to the point where, for instance, you have Granny Melba here, who has a lover's discount where she gets a discount with the peddler. And then if you notice on the peddler screen, she actually has a picture of Melba with a little heart there, right? So obviously, there's a thing there. And then if you flip her card over and you read her little story, and it tells you kind of about how she used to be and how she used to interact with people and why she's in the town. All of them have that. And it's actually really great to see that kind of story. There are a lot of stories, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, in the back of the book here. That's all a different story as well. This is not a story-heavy game. You can read backstory on the characters, and you can read the ending after the final fight, and really that's it. Though there is some town event stuff that can kind of happen that kind of interacts with the characters, and again, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I guess what you might be noticing is it's integrated into everything, into the game board, into the characters, into the design, into the town events, into the ending fight. All of it is this kind of wonderful little world, this quirky little world, and it is quirky. Whether you loot a busty brazier, or whether you have an extendapole, or whether you're, pigging out on food, or just doing other kind of silly stuff like that, or, you'll be seeing a lot of that as I talk about this, but, there's just a lot of goofiness in this game that I really enjoyed, and my kids really enjoyed. It's pretty safe humor. It's honestly kind of, this quirky kind of funny. You're not necessarily going to laugh out loud. It's not like it's giving you some zingers or anything like that. It's just a fun, silly kind of like watching an old cartoon, right? It's kind of like that. It's just this quirky little world that they live in, and I really appreciate the humor in it. All right. So I mentioned town events. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So I kind of mentioned it here as well. Before a fight, you're all going to have some town events. Each person kind of gets their own, and you pass it around or whatever. And there are several different kinds. So there's the kind like this that has bottom shelf goods. And then there's some that are secret. And those secret ones you read and then you just lay down. Okay. But let's look at a few of them just to give an example. Now, again, this is normally a stack this big, right? There's a ton because you're only going to, get 4, 5, 3, depending on how many people are playing 1, 2, 3, 4 times per kind of whole campaign run. But this one just says, I'm going to summarize it. Essentially, you get to buy the bottom things, whatever happens to be on the bottom of the shelf, you get a discount, a huge discount. It's only 2 coins. However, you then have to roll and see if it breaks immediately. In other words, it's like the trash. It's the trash gear that's on the bottom. You might get it for really cheap. It could be a 20 coin item that you get for 2, but it might also just break the moment you buy it. So, that could happen. This one says, secret, a close study, right? So again, he says, You've been keeping a careful eye on the ruffians, looking out for their weakness. When the opportunity arises, you know exactly where to punch. Keep this card face down in front of you. Revealed if the ruffian's weakness is activated, the ruffian immediately takes 2 damage. Well, that's good. In other words, if the ruffian has their weakness revealed, which we'll talk about later, you're going to instantly do 2 damage, and you're going to be like, haha, that's that. But nobody knows what that is. You're not allowed to tell anybody, and this could be all sorts of things. We'll kind of see that in just a moment here. You could have a potion maker. A crazed, top-hatted fellow speedily walks towards you. He's looking for some ingredients for his next potion. You may offer up any pieces of consumable gear to the potion maker. If you give a consumable, you roll. If you roll a 1 to 2, nothing happens. All right? If you roll a 3 or more, you receive the unexpected limb unique gear. So you drink this potion immediately, and you get the unexpected limb. It's a chest gear, headgear, or an accessory. It's 1 Moxie, 3 accuracy, and does the damage. So you can attack with this extra limb growing out of you now. But it says equip immediately as chest gear, headgear, or accessory when received. Unexpected limb cannot be unequipped for any reason. So now you're stuck with this extra limb coming out of your chest, or coming out of your head, or wherever it might be. Very funny. You can't sell it. It sells for 0. You can't get rid of it. All because you drink a potion. Maybe you didn't give him anything. Maybe you didn't do anything. Well, in that case, you actually gain +1, or the next ruffian you face seems altered and has +1 movement. Now, maybe he drank a potion. Who knows what happened? A butterfly effect happened. Either way, if you didn't give him anything, now suddenly you're going to have a harder time fighting the boss because they're moving around more. But you don't know that going in. And I'm fine telling you this one and these few because there are so many. Trust me, your first game, you probably won't even see any of these. Sometimes it matters who's in your party. All you can eat. It's a town event. The group stumbles upon an abandoned buffet table. It's your lucky day. Yay, we get to eat free food that's been sitting out. If Georgie Irongut is not in your group, so he's a character that you can have, then you all enjoy a hearty meal free of charge for the next fight. All townsfolk has +1 max HP. That is huge. It's hard to increase your stats, so everyone getting an extra HP, that is a good buff. That's a good thing to happen. However, if Georgie Irongut is in your group, Georgie's viral corpse rushes ahead of everyone, filling its pockets with snacks for later. Georgie Irongut receives a fresh cake unique here. So nobody gets that, but he gets the fresh cake. Well, what's fresh cake? Here's a fresh cake. He gets an accessory. It says discard fresh cake and restore 2 HP. There is a huge stack of just these kind of special one. Again, it's at least like that. That can come from town events. That can come from enemy cards. Sometimes you're just fighting a bad guy and you end up with a unique gear because some crazy thing happened. You know, they dug something up or they found something or, you know, or you broke something off of them. Who knows what it is? Sometimes their weakness will happen and you get a unique gear from it. That can kind of happen anywhere, and it's really kind of cool when it does. That being said, they're not all good. Not all of these town events are good. Trust me, they're not. For instance, you could say a closer look. You think you catch a glimpse of a ruffian between some buildings, but you need to take a closer look. Roll plus your accuracy. So everybody has some stats there, and you just add your accuracy to it. So if you're very accurate, you're going to roll high. If you're not, good luck. 1 to 3, that's a ruffian, all right, and you've been spotted. You cannot shop during the town phase. Begin the next phase adjacent to the ruffian. So you start, he charged you, you can't even buy anything. That sucks. Otherwise, you can reveal the ruffian and town map because you don't know who you're fighting and what you're going against next. That's hugely beneficial because you do this before you shop, so then you can shop knowing exactly where you're going to fight. But it could be really bad. Or, here's a secret one, so when you have to lay in front of you, you were tossing some rocks down a hill and accidentally caused a small avalanche. Keep this card face down in front of you. The next time another townsfolk interacts with a non-final fight terrain piece, reveal this card, cancel the interaction, the terrain can no longer be activated. So if somebody's trying to come to the barn door and knock on the door, because you can do that, and try and get the guy to shoot the guy or give you an item or do something like that, you say, nope, actually you can't do that. In fact, nobody can deal with that. I actually didn't had an avalanche. Or if they're trying to break down a fence, now suddenly the fence can't be broken down. There's tons of stuff that can happen where that maybe they're searching in the trench. Well, now, nope, it's filled with rocks, actually, sorry. But you don't know that and you can't tell anybody not to, and then they do like, oh, nope, sorry, I guess you can't. Wasted your moxie, wasted your turn. Kind of a bummer. Bad things can happen, good things can happen. A ton of this. I like these town events. They're thematic, and they're fun, and they're unique. All right, now, one thing I want to state before we dive into some of the more battle mechanics here is that the game flow is super smooth. I am a sucker for just efficient and nuanced game mechanics that don't bog down, that don't have some big song and dance. I don't want to go build combos somewhere. I don't want to update a million different things. I don't want to have different mechanics that I have to look up for different things. And so it's great that this game just flows so well. So on your card, you have a character, right? And they have their health, their movement, their moxie, which is essentially their action points, and then their accuracy, okay? Which is essentially a 2-hit plus or minus. So, for instance, Norman Fishboy here has 4 health, is what he starts out with, 4 movement, so he can move, where is he? He is right here. So he can move 1, 2, 3, 4 if he wants to, right? That's fine. He can do that. And then he has 2 moxie, right? So let's look at his stuff here. So for 2 moxie, he could do this. Sling a fish at a ruffian within 5 squares for 2 damage, but he must be adjacent to the pond or moat. Well, he's not adjacent there, so he can't do that. Or he could attack with his reliable rod, which is a melee 2-handed spear that costs 2 moxie, has a 6 accuracy at range 2 and 1 damage. So he spent his moxie. He's going to roll. He'll grab a die and he'll roll. Okay, he rolled a 7. It's an accuracy of 7 plus. It's 7, but then you got to do a plus 2, right? He could have had a minus 4 to his accuracy, in which case he would have missed. So it just all depends. So he did 1 damage. So you update, this is flipped over. You update the damage 1, you're done. That's it. That's all there is to it. When the bad guys are going, they have a deck. right here, right? That's right there. And you just flip it over, and that's what you do, okay? And you just read it, and it says target, and it says what he does, and then in After Effects, if something happened, that's it. You do that, same kind of thing. There's no defense or anything like that. Sometimes you'll roll for like a test or something like that, in which case, again, rolled, okay, I got a 6. It's either a pass or, either I did it or not. That's really it. That's as smooth as it gets. When you're buying stuff, you just go and you're like, oh, it's my turn. There's a buying order. So the beating order is reversed with the buying order, and it swaps every time, which is kind of cool. So you're not super in control of when necessarily you go or when necessarily you can buy. And people can buy items that, oh, I really wanted that. Or maybe it would be great if I could go first, but I can't, or whatever. So everything just goes super smooth. It really does. Everything guides you. Every card tells you exactly what it needs. So if you have to move something or do something weird, the card will tell you. It's just great. The terrain here, I already mentioned that. Even the bad guy stuff, right? Which again, they have story there. They have the health. They have the movement. They have what they do depending on when they fight. I'll talk about that later. What the movement is. Their final fight stuff. It all guides you. Read page 19 or 10 or 18 or what's the special objective. I never had to look a single thing up when playing this game. Not a single thing. And that's pretty rare. Even for the simple games. I normally have to look up something or, let me check and make sure. There's nothing. The rulebook explained it incredibly well. Everything is kind of explained either on the board or on the card, and you're basically just kind of buying stuff and beating stuff up, and that's really what you do. Now, there's obviously nuance in that, but I really enjoyed how nuanced and just smooth flowing the gameplay is. There wasn't a missing beat at all. We could just smoothly go from turn to turn to turn, discuss our strategy, and go ahead and do that. And, you move over here and try and do that, and I'm going to go hide in the haystack, and which removes me from the board, which I know because it's right there. It's great. Now, I will say that while I played this without the updated rulebook, they did update the rulebook, and one of the things they did was add a critical hit. So if you roll a 10, it's a critical hit. And that does something based off of what you do. So then you roll again and see what you do. And that I would have to look up a few times. Because if you roll a 1, you do this. If you roll a 2 or 3, you do this. If you roll a 4 and a 5, you do this. Or a 6 and a 7 or an 8 or 9, or whatever. And they all have different effects. Sometimes it's +1 damage or you get to, do whatever. I don't know. But that would be a table I'd have to look up. Unfortunately, that'd be the only thing in this game. And so I would caution the developers as they go and they keep developing this game to really try and figure out how smooth and how heavy and how efficient they want this game as they're adding things, and just be aware of that if the only thing I ever have to look up in this entire game is a 2-hit on a critical hit, which won't happen very often, which is part of the problem, right? It'd be pretty rare. So it'd be a few play sessions before I really got comfortable with it, I imagine. That would be the one thing I'd have to go look up. Is that worth it? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I like doing extra damage, but I also like really smooth gameplay. Speaking of which, I don't know if you noticed or not, but when I get hit and I have to roll, that's it. If I attacked, that's it. I'm not putting this as a positive or negative because my group is kind of split on this. I don't mind this at all. Arena, the Conquest, Tenaris Adventures, they do the same exact thing there, where you're just rolling a 2-hit, and then you either hit or you didn't. This is pretty much the same thing. Some people hate it though. Some people really want to roll all the dice and do that plus defense and want to have a defense roll and something like that. But that's not typically the case. Typically the case, you roll a single thing. There are no re-rolls typically. There are no, pluses or minuses except for your accuracy sometimes. Sometimes it might be something like your moxie or something like that for a skill check. But that's really it. And so when you attack and I missed or I didn't, very deterministic. Now that it adds to the smooth gameplay, obviously, because you roll, bam, you're done. You know the results of your roll almost instantly. So it's kind of like, I hit him or I didn't. You move that and you move on. As opposed to, let's see, this was a bang and then this cancels out his shield here, but then he has a wild here and a special ability on the, there's none of that. That's not a thing. So, it helps with the efficiency of it, which I appreciate, but at the same time, you're not rolling a ton of dice. There's not a lot of manipulation to it. There's mitigation, obviously. You can control your accuracy somewhat for the most part. But suffice it to say, I just wanted to note that because I think that's an important thing to know going into this. If you like that, if you're okay with that, great. If you're not, you might want to keep that in mind. Okay, now I want to talk about the characters for a little bit, because another positive is how unique each character is. It's super cool. So for instance, we have Norman Fishboy. You already saw his fishy cap and his reliable rod, but not only do they have different stuff, like he starts fairly accurate, and he has, they typically all have 4 here, but sometimes their movement's slower or higher or whatever. They all have different stats, which is great. But they all have 2 completely unique abilities. For instance, he has lengthy limbs. Thanks to Norman's long arms, he gains +2 range with all melee weapons, which means his starting reliable rod actually is a melee weapon at range 4, because it already starts with range 2 and he adds 2 to it. So because his long arms plus the fishing pole, he's reaching way far out there. He's a ranged melee character, if that makes any sense. Additionally, he has a strange attraction. When you hit a ruffian with any weapon, you may pull them up to 2 squares towards you. So you can actually do some boss movement, which is huge in some of the final fights and just in general and trying to get the enemy, especially if you start to learn the enemy tactics and you realize, he targets the, closer guys a lot, or those are really devastating or whatever. You can kind of move them around, or maybe he needs to be near something or close to another person to get in range. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want to do that, but that's really, really big. So that's just him, just his starting weapons, and you can see kind of the thing there. Granny Melba, for instance, has a Rudy Tudor. It's a ranged one-handed gun, 1 moxie, 6+ accuracy, 2 damage. That's great. Range 6, but when using the Rudy Tudor, you cannot attack on the following turn. So in other words, you essentially exhaust this, and you can't just rapid fire this thing. You gotta, what's a single shot, you gotta reload it or something like that. But maybe you want to actually equip her with the Granny's Cane melee one-handed mace, where it only does 1 damage, a little bit more accurate, and still costs a 2 moxie, but you can attack every turn versus the 1 moxie. But she also has Farsighted, gaining gains +X accuracy when attacking, where X equals the square distance between her and the ruffian. So the farther away she is, the more accurate she gets. So she starts with the -2, and that's really big too. So she starts very inaccurate unless you're at range. So that's kind of hurting the Granny's Cane a little bit there, though it does have a little bit lower accuracy thing. And I already told you about the Lover's Discount, where she gets a 2 gold coin discount when buying stuff. Again, very unique, very cool. You have Yancey Plover over here. He's slow moving, right? He's kind of neutral in his accuracy, but he has 3 moxie. He has a Taunter that costs 2 moxie. If the next card in the action deck targets a single townsfolk, it targets you instead. So he's kind of the tank, right? And he's a blacksmith. So while in town, another townsfolk may pay you 5 coins. So they pay you 5 coins. You gained 5 coins. And then discard a non-starting piece of gear. And if they do, they receive the first weapon in the Peddler deck. So you're drawing the Peddler deck until they get the first weapon. That might be, again, a 20 gold a weapon. It might be a 4 gold weapon that range the thing that they don't want. They don't know that, and they have to discard something and give him money. But you might get a freaking sweet thing, which is cool. Otherwise, he has Old Smacky, which costs 2 moxie. So if you notice with the 3, he can't attack and do the Taunter. He needs to decide, unless he gets some gear to increase that or something else to increase it. 5 accuracy, 1 damage, but on a critical hit, he does +1 damage. And then he has the Smithy's Apron, which is chest gear, and once per fight, he prevents all damage to him from an action. So he can essentially taunt and then discard that and be like, I took no damage, I just soaked that up. That's huge. We'll do one more here. Here's Henlo Bulwark. And again, look at that, 5 movement. So very, very fast. Only a -1 inaccuracy, a little inaccurate. Only 2 moxie and only 3 health, so a little bit weaker, but very fast. Pinch Provisions, for 2 moxie, she can restore 1 HP to an adjacent townsfolk. So she can be a healer. And she's a headless chicken. The first time you would be knocked out per fight, you survive with 1 HP and place yourself adjacent to another townsfolk. So again, while one less health, actually can be pretty strong. Starts with some chest gear, actually some farmer's overalls, which is +3 to terrain rolls on the overgrown cornfield or mushroom grove. So if she goes to an overgrown cornfield mushroom grove, neither of them are here, because again, each one is unique and there are different terrains here. Then she can do that a lot easier. She also starts with a wheat sickle. It's a melee one-handed sword that 2 moxie, 5+ accuracy, 1 damage. Fairly basic. Okay, so very unique heroes there. And again, you start with quite a few of them. So there's a selection and you can kind of change them. And again, the gear is going to change immensely. And as the gear changes, it's huge. It can change completely how you play. We'll get into that actually right now. So I talked about the gear, and there is a ton of gear, and it's a lot of fun. Let me find the gear I wanted to show you. Okay, so there is some really unique gear that's incredibly powerful. I'm going to talk about the power creep and unlocking stuff and all that towards the end of the video, because I think that's a huge point on what makes this game so unique as a boss battler and what makes it so different. It's very similar to some video game, whole video game genre I'm going to talk about later. But for now, let's look at the extendable, right? Again, this world allows for some crazy stuff. I struggle to figure out what other world you could do this. Maybe a sci-fi world. Or maybe a magic world or something. I mean, I guess you could do it in different ways, but I really like how they did it here because it's a little goofy. An extendable, it's a melee one-handed unique, so you have to put it in one of your melee hands. When equipped, your other weapons have +5 range. So you essentially attach a melee weapon at the end of a pole, or maybe a gun and you're shooting the gun because it has a little hand that can hold the weapon. And so maybe you're just holding the gun out there. So let's say that Norman Fishboy with a range 4 equipped the extendable. Well, he couldn't because he had a two-handed, but maybe he got a better weapon, but doesn't have the range. Oh, that's a bummer. Well, now it doesn't matter because he has extendable. Maybe he got this one. This is fun. The four-hander. Again, the humor is everywhere in this game. I love it. It's a melee. It's this two-handed sword. However, you must be standing adjacent to another townsfolk to use this weapon. So you both have to swing it. It costs 4 moxie, so a ton. 7+ accuracy. It's hard to hit something that's moving, but does 4 damage. Hilarious. Now, attach that to the extendable, and suddenly you have this at range 5. Huge, completely different how you play now, right? If you're Yancey, and you're just there tanking and melee, and suddenly you get this combination, or something like that. I guess you can't really, again, you can't attach this to the two-handed. It's a bad example. You can attach it to here, the singing sword. There's a lot of examples you can do. Suffice it to say, anything one-handed you could do it. You could do it on his melee weapon. It's just, it's fun. And suddenly you're playing completely different. You're trying to, hey, let's swing this sword. You know, it's hilarious. Maybe you want to specialize in something. Well, you have like the singing sword. It's a melee one-handed sword instrument. The instrument's a key here. 2 moxie, 6+ accuracy, 1 damage. That doesn't seem that great, right? I mean, it's kind of average. It's like a starting gear. Townsfolk within 2 squares of you deal +1 damage on your first attack each turn. So your sword is actively singing, which is buffing the party. So as long as you're within 2 squares of your party, they're doing more damage. Plus, then you can still attack with your sword because the sword that's singing is also attacking. Why not? Maybe you want to be a healer. Maybe you're playing Henlo and you just want to go full heal. So you get the medicine bag, which is a 2 moxie, restore 1 HP to an adjacent townsfolk that you can just keep using. Or a buffet tray, which is a melee one-handed shield, where once per fight you can prevent all damage dealt to you or an adjacent townsfolk from a ruffian action. And for 3 moxie, you can restore HP to an adjacent townsfolk. Or maybe you have the potion pack, which is chest gear, which is a 1 moxie. You can roll, and on a 5+, you heal 1 for 1. Or smelling salts, where you can discard it and return the knocked out person with 1 HP. Or maybe you get the concert ticket because you have the singing sword, and this allows you to change your gear for no cost as long as you have an instrument, which is great because maybe you want to swap to the bard's ukulele, which is a melee 2-handed instrument. For 3 moxie, you can deal damage to adjacent ruffian, just straight you deal the damage, or for 3 moxie, you can restore 1 HP. This is a versatile one. You can equip it and then kind of just choose what you do. Or a lemonade, where you can discard to restore 3 HP. Or maybe you have a healer's bonnet on your head, which restores 1 HP to an adjacent townsfolk and lowers your accuracy and moxie by 1. So definitely you're not attacking, but you are healing. Or a melodramatic Maraca, which townsfolk within 3 squares of you have +1 accuracy. So maybe you have that plus a singing sword, and so you have these 2 one-handed things, and everybody's getting +1 accuracy, +1 damage, all if they're near you. Again, huge. There's a lot of specialty there. There's also even gear sets. Now, there's not a lot of these, but these are super cool. For instance, there's a hero's tunic. This is a chest gear, where it says +1 max HP for each completed feat you own to maximum of 3. What's the feats? These are the feats. I'll get into those in a little bit. But essentially, you can do different things to get these feats, and you gain them kind of permanently. You get +1 HP for each one of that. Maybe you were also able to get the hero's cap, and it has +1 accuracy for each feat that you have, up to maximum 3. Or the Hero Shield, and if you haven't noticed, this is Legend of Zelda. This is Link, obviously. The Hero Shield is +1 moxie for each feat you have, and then once per fight you can prevent all damage. Or the Hero Sword, for this weapon has +1 damage for each feat you own. It has a natural 0, so the more feats you have, as long as you're playing feats, suddenly you're playing this set where this is your buff. This is how you increase in damage. You're not worried about getting more items unless it's in this, because you increase more. Or the Hero's Tights, where you get +1 movement for each feat. Or the Hero's Woodwind. Yeah, they even have the Ocarina of Time here. Or for 2 moxie, you can restore 1 HP to another townsfolk with an X range, where X is the amount of completed feats. Again, that is super cool. I love item sets. And I love how it's themed like that too. It's really, really cool. All right, that's a lot about items, but there is even more variety. Again, I was so impressed with the variety in this game. Each of the enemies, which you get a ton of, I mean, you get, this is all just the ones I don't have on there, but each of these play different, right? And then in fact, each of them play different based off of this. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but they even have, different themes. So for instance, the Abundants here are just swarmy. So they just kind of grab you and pull you in and do the kind of, they move you a lot is what the Abundants do. And they have this far area of effect reach is what they're typically doing. Or you can have Penny Pinchetti, and what she does is she's pretty much just taking your money. And in fact, if you take enough of her money, her weakness activates where she just is paid off and she leaves. You get no loot. You won the fight, I guess, but you don't get any money at the end. In fact, she took all your money. I will talk about having her in there in just a little bit, again, towards the end there. You can have Deputy Wagons, which is actually a very friendly puppy that just happens to have guns attached to him that are constantly going off, so he's accidentally shooting you a lot. He's just clueless and an idiot, and so he's taking your items as a squeaky toy, or he's digging in the ground and, like, pelting you with dirt, but then he also digs up a random accessory that was buried, and so you get a random accessory, but you also got damaged around him. Or you have Will Barlow, which is a wheelbarrow that's haunted, and so he's constantly moving around, and he's like, if he runs into you, he actually heals himself, and he's like shooting these like ghosts out, and the ghosts are doing stuff and taking your gear and whatnot. And that's just 3 of them. All of these act incredibly unique, and all of them have a unique final fight. So at the final fight, you have a different setup and you have a special objective on how to do that. Now that's really cool too, because like for instance on the wheelbarrow, because Will Barlow is haunted, you actually have to lay down these like signs, and you can only damage him on these signs. So if you fight him in any other time than this final fight, which is covered up here, oh my goodness, so many items. There it is. If you fight him as a final fight here, like here, then he plays completely different. He plays different if he's a chump versus a hooligan versus a troublemaker versus a final fight, which is this list right down here. So not only do you have all of these bosses, but each of them have 4 different modes. One of them completely unique with maybe a different setup, completely different rules, and then of course 3 different endings to each one. Because you could lose, which is an ending, you could win, which is an ending, and you could get the special objective, which is another ending. I'm talking about that in a little bit, so I'm not going to spoil anything yet, but we'll be talking specifically about that at the end here, which we're getting close to, I promise. So that's huge. Or maybe you have the bones here for the dog, because the dog you have to tranquilize. You can't kill him. In fact, if you kill him, you lost. He's just a friendly guy. You just gotta settle him down a little bit. So his final fight is all about trying to tranquilize him, which again is totally unique, and it's totally different fighting him in a final fight versus any of the other ones. And different things happen. They get worse and worse. For instance, the Bandits, by the way, are brutal. In fact, they were the hardest fight I had. I'm going to talk about difficulty here in a little bit. I keep saying that, but it's because there's a really big point I'm going to make here once I kind of build up to it. The Abundants here have a chump, which is not really much of anything, right? But then they have the hooligan where townsfolk that start their turn next to the Abundants take 1 damage. Now again, remember, he's grabbing you, pulling him to you, so you're going to start there a lot. So now suddenly, pretty much half of your turns at least, you're going to start adjacent to him and he's going to hurt you. Or at least he's going to try to. And then you have Troublemaker. If you do Troublemaker, grab the legs. Townsfolk that start their next turn next to him, take 1 damage, then lose 1 movement and 1 accuracy. That's where I fought him. So not only did we take a damage, but we were getting permanently debuffed in this fight from him, and it sucked. It was bad. People were dying. And then, of course, there's the final fight where you flip over and you do the specific things that come here. And this one, a bunny queen comes, and you have to deal with the bunny queen. A ton of stuff here. Each of them have that. Each of them have something unique that happens with them as they progress and get harder, and it changes very much your strategy. Now, I will say, and this is kind of a negative just because it really sucks when it happens and it's hard to overcome. Will Barlow, for instance, has a move where he can essentially slow you down, right? Where was it? Ankle roller, right? So in this one, again, he's zipping around. He's moving around. Townsfolk with the lowest movement is who he's going to target. So he's already targeting somebody who doesn't move very fast, right? So maybe like Yancey, which happened in our case. Move to the target. If Barlow reaches him, he deals the damage. So bam, already dealt the damage. But then the after effect is they roll. If the target rolls a 1 or a 4, their ankles are smashed and they lose 2 movement. 5+, the target needs to turn to recover. They cannot move their next turn. No matter what, they're not really moving the next turn is what I hear. That is devastating. And having a low movement really sucks because you're just kind of, especially for somebody like him who can move so fast, you're just kind of chasing him the whole time. And that really, really is a bummer if you're that player. Because you feel like you can't do anything. If you don't have a ranged weapon and you're suddenly slowed and he's zipping around everywhere, what are you going to do? Because you can't go less than 1, so I'm gonna get you. Oh no, you moved over here. All right, kind of a bummer. You're pretty much out of the game at that point. You can do stuff like, again, if you're over here, like you can slowly go here and try and maybe like knock on there and have that do damage, or there's a few options there. Obviously, like if you have Norman Fishboy, you can pull him in. If you're farther in the game, you have some other options maybe to reduce his movement or pull him or taunt him maybe and have him come to you that way. There's a few things you could do. That's what we had him do, is essentially just taunt at that point. So hopefully he was targeted and he came there and he could whack him before he moves away. But suffice to say, that's certainly a thing and it really sucks. I wish there was some way you could maybe rest to, heal a little bit and start moving more. I don't know. But if that happened to everybody where all of us were just moving, I don't know if we would have finished that fight. That would have been a bummer. Again, this game can get really hard. And so you can lose on the final fight for sure. If you can't even damage him unless he's in a certain spot and he's zipping around everywhere and he's all buffed up and he's doing all this stuff, because it could be a bummer. I didn't like not having low movement. Anytime you make a board game, you gotta worry about taking actions away, right? Getting knocked down and losing a turn sucks. If it happens over and over again and you've lost the last 5 turns, that can really suck. So if you've permanently been lowered in your movement, that can really suck. So something to keep in mind, I think, as they develop it, and just a balance to have, knowing that this is a boss battler and it's supposed to be, a little difficult. Okay, finally, we're at the point where I've been saying, we'll talk about that later. I'm sure that may have been slightly annoying. Kind of like not having enough movement to do anything for an entire fight. No, okay, so one of the cool things about this is it is very roguelike. Now, if you don't know what roguelike is, Rogue was a very, very old video game back in the day that essentially had you going through a random run of a dungeon, and if you died, you restarted. There was no saving. There was nothing except you trying to get as far as you could. Over time, the most common thing we do now for a roguelike, and the reason it's a roguelike is because it's similar to that, where you kind of go through a run through and you go until you die, or maybe you win. But nowadays, what typically happens is you unlock new items. So in fact, there's a few things. Number one, it's normally very swingy. You can have good runs and bad runs, because the whole point is you're having runs, right? The whole point is you don't just do one. You're constantly going through this and trying to do it as good as you can. And the reason you're trying to do it as good as you can is because there's unlockables. And that's what this game has. So there's a lot of variability in the damage you can have. For instance, when I started out with Penny Pinchetti, which means right up front, we had all of our money taken and she just left, which means we didn't earn anything, which means we bought nothing going in to the second fight. We didn't increase we had starting gear second fight, all because our dumb luck and then how bad we did in that dumb luck of getting her first, taking all of our money, and that propagated the whole run, right? That set the tone. And again, that's very roguelike. Sometimes you get this random level of, these enemies are the worst. They just shoot me off screen or, whatever. So that can happen a ton. So getting Penny Pinchetti at the start, that sucks, all right? Having the abundance, again, bad. You can have your gear stolen, bad. You can be like, there was one time where I had my gear swapped. And so I was Granny Melba, and I had my ranged gun, and I was an accuracy build, and I had all this stuff. And I had to swap it with freaking Norman Fishboy here. So suddenly Norman Fishboy has my gun, and I have his freaking reliable rod, which is a range 2, and I have no way to extend that range 2. So now I'm suddenly range 2, which I had, I think, a -3, because she starts at -2, -3 accuracy. So, I mean, I could up it to about 0, but it was a 6+, so I didn't even necessarily hit on it, and I had to get close to it suddenly. It just, that kind of stuff happens. You could just, your build, oh man, I'm the hero. Nope, it's gone. It's taken. You're just going to have to swap out of it. You can get hit with that. Not only did we start with that, but you remember that this right here, a closer look where you get attacked by the ruffian and you can't shop? That was me. This was my card. So not only did I not buy anything in round 1, but then going into the final fight, I had to start adjacent to the freaking guy. And I couldn't buy anything new. So I couldn't buy anything here. I couldn't buy anything here. And I couldn't buy anything here. That can happen. You can have a bad run. You can have a great run. You could get you could get the 4-hander sword and just be whacking things like crazy. You can have an amazing run with some great items and just have it really go good. Now, unlockables. Let's talk about unlockables a little bit. There is this mystery box here. And I told you in my unboxing, if you didn't see that, you can still look at that and actually view these, and I'll critique kind of all of this stuff in depth. Like, link down below in the description for that. There's this on mystery box. It says unlockable gear, no peeking. Well, I peeked, but I also, got to see some stuff. So, since I told you, I'll put a timestamp here, but I'm going to show you just a few items, just to give you an example. Just an example. Trust me, there's a whole stack here, and I'm sure there's going to be more. Just an example. Okay. So, for instance, you could have the Cursed Wand, which is a secret from Barlow. So you can get this by doing his special event. So if you are good enough in the game to where not only did you beat him, but you did the harder version of him by doing a special thing, and each one's different. In this one, you have to kill him, and you have to kill a townsfolk member with the item that lays down these. So you get that item, and I think I actually have it here. The knife and bucket. Right? 2 Moxie, you and adjacent townsfolk take 1 damage, place a ritual mark terrain piece adjacent to you. So you can either hurt somebody else for their blood, or you can hurt yourself for your blood. You lay it down there. If you hurt somebody else enough to kill them and kill him, which is harder to do, it's harder to do both. And this is actually one of the easier ones to get. Then you can get the Cursed Wand, perhaps, or you can get the Reluctant Ghost. This one you get both. These are permanently added, for the rest of the time you own this game, unless you ever want to reset, into the shopping, the peddler's deck, so that you can buy this. Well, what do these kind of things do? Well, here's the Cursed Wand. It's a 1 Moxie, 6+ accuracy, 1 damage, range 4 for 6 Mox. 6 Mox. You can set this weapon's damage to 4 for the remainder of the fight. That's huge. A 1 Mox, 4 damage is massive. It's better than the 4-handed sword, that's for sure. It costs 1 less Mox for each knocked out townsfolk. So not only that, but if you're in a pinch and people are dying, suddenly this 6 gets cheaper and cheaper. So it will cost 5, and it'll cost 4, and it'll cost 3, and then it'll cost 2. So if you're the last one standing and you have this, you can just and maybe even win. So this kind of catch-up mechanic makes the game slightly easier over time. As you kind of earn it, you get better at the runs and better, which allows you to unlock some of the harder ones. Or if you have difficulty doing this, well, having that might help. Right? Because then as long as the sheriff guy has that, and you've already been equipped with that, and you got that, then you can go in, if you have a good run and you happen to see this card, and go in and be able to do that. That's actually really cool. That's, again, very roguelike. It's very common, like Shovel Knights, kind of like that. There's a lot of roguelike games where that's what you're doing. But you can also unlock alternate starting gear. This is super cool. So let me find the one I wanted to show you. I thought I had it set here, but maybe I don't. But I should have. Okay, here, yeah, so we can do this. Okay, so if you recall, this is Hinlow Bulwark's starting gear. You get a wheat sickle, which is kind of a bog standard weapon. That's kind of average. And then you can be better at the grove and cornfield. Or now you could start with this, which is the Sad Harvest and the Covert Disguise. Sad Harvest is 1 Moxie, 6+ accuracy, 1 damage, but a range of 3. So a little bit harder to hit, but costs less Moxie and has range. Well, that's kind of nice. And by the way, you're obviously thrown. You're throwing the harvest, the corn and stuff. Or you can have a Covert Disguise. This is special gear. It says your Pinch Provisions ability now reads, and if you recall, the Pinch Provision says 2 Moxie, restore 1 HP to adjacent townsfolk. Makes you a healer. This says 2 Moxie, steal 1 coin from an adjacent townsfolk if possible. They gain 1 movement, 1 Moxie, or 1 accuracy for the fight. So now, instead of the healer, you're kind of buffing while also taking some of their money. So you're kind of almost getting paid for it. Again, very, very interesting alternate set. So you're starting yourself out maybe with a build in mind, or maybe you just like this gameplay a bit better. Maybe this works better for you with the headless chicken. You can now suddenly start with different gear. There's a lot like that. And not only that, but a lot of these items are super unique. I'm not gonna tell you what it does, but one of the alternate gears that Norman Fishboy can start with is an item that you can actively discard things to stack onto it, and the more things that are stacked onto it, the better that thing is. I want to say what it does or what it is or what you have to do to put it there, but that's a game feature that doesn't exist anywhere else but on that card, as far as I can tell, which again is super cool, and there's a ton of that. The other thing that this does that's really, really big, and one of the reasons I personally love roguelikes, is the discovery of it. You might have run this game and played through this game and gone to the final fight or died early or, done it all depends how far you get and how lucky you are maybe, and how good you are at, reacting to that and handling that and anticipating that. Anyway, you see something new every time you play. Eventually you're just unlocking these you'll get a town event that has you start eating food, and now suddenly you have this piece of cake. I've never seen this piece of cake before. That's a brand new thing for me. If you hadn't gotten that card, you wouldn't know piece of cake is an item, and you wouldn't know what it does, and suddenly you come across that. Or you've never fought the wheelbarrow at the end, so when I first got this, I didn't know what this token did. What does this token do? I had no clue. I was like, what the heck? Why is there freaking Satanism in this game? What the heck's going on here? Well, now I know it's from the haunted wheelbarrow, and it's only there if you fight him on the final fight. Each of these people have something unique when it comes to the token. This is used for one of them. This is used for one of them. There's others I haven't even shown you. There are different things that you're having to do. There are different items you're unlocking. There's alternate starting sets you're doing. There's seeding of the peddler deck with other unique, cool items. And not only that, but when you see that and you know that you unlock that, you'll instantly remember what you did. You'll remember that you remember that when we did that? You remember how I killed you? But then, hey, guess what? You know what? You can have the item now because you died for that item, right? That kind of stuff comes up, and it's awesome. It's great, and I haven't seen that in another game this well done. Because a lot of times that kind of stuff is in the legacy stuff that is much heavier and much more convoluted, and you're doing a lot of stuff, and a lot of times it asks you to destroy stuff, and this doesn't do anything like that, but it's just really cool to have that kind of quasi-legacy thing in there that instantly brings back memories of how you earned it, because all of it's earned. Or you remember when we came across that food thing and then you just ate all the freaking food and now you have this freaking item. You better use that item and gain that buff, because we're not going to squander that, because we could have all had extra health if it wasn't for you. That kind of stuff is great. It's awesome. And I love it. I love the fact that I can keep playing this. And not only will I fight a different version of these guys with a different mix, because there's a huge stack of them already with whatever unique team I have, with whatever unique gear I have. But then I can actually, if I do good enough, I can get something special at the end. Something that will last me the entire rest of my time with this board game. It is awesome, and I love it. That is so addicting to me. The smooth gameplay is awesome. The smooth gameplay is great. I like that. But I like that in Blood Rage too. But Blood Rage is the same Loki strategy no matter how many times I do it. This is unique, and it's great. Okay, now I'm about to close from my final opinion here, but I want to first put out a few more negatives, because no game's perfect. That's all right. And some are better than others, and some have issues you can overcome. Some are inherent in the design. Just depends. One of the things, while you're unlocking gear, and that's great, and while you're doing all this, and I better keep organized here, while you're doing all that, even though there's a ton of this, right? There's a ton. In fact, there's more, and I think I didn't even grab it all. Before each one, you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. You're going to see 10, 20, 30, 40 cards at least, if you don't reset, or, get cards otherwise, whatever, a game. You will see repeats of these, and you will see all of the items eventually in this. Actually, so I know I haven't seen all of them in game, and there might be a few of those that, again, just happen to never get drawn out. But more items, obviously better. So one of the things I hope for, I haven't seen the Kickstarter yet, but one of the things I hope for is that they keep unlocking more items. All the items have such cool, unique mechanics attached to them anyway and feels to them. But again, when it comes to roguelikes, especially when you're meant to just keep running this over and over again, the more variety, the better. The more of I never come across this. What does that thing do? Well, that banner allows me to not get, my turn, interrupted by, their breakpoints. That's awesome. That's cool. There's an item there that does that. You might see it, you might not. The more of those you have, the better replayability is by far. I'm not even so concerned about the more characters, though that'll be great because it also means more minis and more bosses. Again, that is huge too because that adds a lot of variety in there because that's 4 different ones. But just adding more items is a huge part of it, and I would like to see more. As it stands, I would actually, while this is awesome and it's a plus, it's also a negative just because of how many you see. Seeing 40 of these every run-in, if you go it all the way, is problematic in that case. You just need a ton of items to get that variety that you need. Now, additionally, the other thing I wanted to mention is while each of these guys has a unique map that's just to them, which is cool. Each of them has a unique map. And in fact, some of them have a final fight version of it that's a little bit different, which is also cool. I don't feel like they use the terrain enough. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times they'll do something with the pond because they know the pond's there. But one of the great things about knowing exactly how the map is going to look for each boss is you can integrate that into it huge. So right now, a lot of the cards, when they're fighting, we'll just say go to the, person with the most money, or go to the highest health, or the lowest movement, or whatever. But it'd be great if they did more with the terrain. I just felt like it was a little underutilized still. They could have it to where, like, they go and they destroy the haystack, and if anybody's hiding in there. And so you thought you were safe. Well, it turns out actually they just destroyed the whole thing. You remove it from the board, or it can't be used anymore when it's still there, or flip it over and has alternate art, or who knows what. And then suddenly you're buried in the dirt. If the wheelbarrow did that, or maybe they use the bees against you actually, and so they purposely put you into the beehive, or move items. Maybe they can move the picnic thing, or move the beehive adjacent to you, or there's a ton of stuff that I think you can do. They interact with it a little bit, but it is just a little bit, and I would love to see that done more. I think there's a prime opportunity just to be able, because you control it all, it's just asking to be integrated just as well as everything else. And I felt like it wasn't quite as integrated, which is kind of a bummer. All right, one last negative I have, and that is actually with the terrain. Now, there's a lot of terrain. I mean, look at all this other terrain. That's super cool, and it's great. Don't get me wrong. But look how many, you use this many in every single one. Use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 can't go into this very often. So even with this, you're going to see that barn a lot. You're going to see this pond a lot. You're going to see these beehives a lot, or this. I mean, there are some that are, you just, like, for instance, with this run, you won't see the well. I don't think at all. There might have been the well with Penny Pinchot. I can't remember. Either way, in fact, I guess I could look real quick, but I don't. Yeah, okay. So there was a well with the dog. Actually, shoot, I don't know what I'm talking about. I know there was a wave that I didn't use, but that may be a special thing. I don't know. I think I pretty much saw them all. No, actually, I didn't. I haven't seen the car yet. Or the dynamite and detonator. I don't even know what that's all about. So there's still some that are a little bit more rare than others, but you're going to see that barn a heck of a lot, right? You're going to see a ditch or a river a lot. You're going to see a corn. So more terrain obviously would help too. And a lot of this, again, can be solved by the Kickstarter. I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't know their plans, but if they do, if they have an expansion for it, I'm interested. If they are unlocking that, I'm highly interested. If they end up adding a lot of terrain, a lot of items, and this is going to be one you're going to want to grab the Kickstarter of for sure, because that is huge. There is a ton of variety here, but the more the merrier. And I think for a few of these where you see a lot of that, or you see a lot of this, the more variety, the better. Okay, let's go into final thoughts. I really, really like this game. I really do. It's a ton of fun. It's very quick to set up. It's very easy to set up. You have your starting stuff. One of the things that's great is that the campaign is just these kind of these quick fights. They're very easy to kind of pick up and go, and oh, we left here, or you could complete all of this in an afternoon of gaming. If you wanted to have a game evening and you played this and you didn't start super late, you could play it all the way through and have a full run through. I think that's awesome. None of the battles last a whole long time. The shopping tends to go quick. Even playing with children, it is actually fairly kid friendly. There's a little bit of, silly blood, but it's all very cartoony. None of it is graphic or violent or anything like that. Which is great. So the kids really enjoyed it, and it's goofy and silly. My father's in his 70s, and he actually really enjoyed the theme because, again, he can almost kind of relate to a lot of this kind of stuff when it comes to the style and the quirkiness and all that kind of, just off the wall kind of stuff that's in this game. It's huge. That roguelike experience of running through and unlocking gear and seeing something that you haven't seen before, or interacting with the bosses in different ways, or, you may have fought Bort Dovis, but did you fight him as a troublemaker? Because, oh my gosh, he is so hard. You thought he was easy as a chump? You thought he was a chump as a chump? It's because he was. Wait until he's a troublemaker. He will trouble your maker. That maker is going to be troubled. Or then maybe you'll do a final fight, and with the final fight, again, it's completely different. It's a whole unique thing just for him. Only if you happen to draw his token for the final fight. Otherwise, you will never see that. And even if you do that, there are 3 endings to that. So you could lose it, and that's an ending. You'll read a little bit of the story and what happens, and stuff might happen. Or you won it. Okay, that's great, but did you get the special? Oh, you didn't get the special ending. Oh, man, you should have gotten the special ending. So now you're going to have to wait until you randomly fight him again, and then get a good enough run where you get the final, unlock based off of doing so well. And maybe you had to do more to do that. This is so replayable. And this is so much simple, good fun. And it is such an awesome theme. I was hesitant to even take this prototype just because, you know me, I like really dark, grim stuff. I like demons and witches and, like magic powers and, blood that doesn't look like jelly. And, I love that. If I could be like some demon lord that takes possession of a good guy and murderizes their other troops, let me do that. It's awesome. This was such an enjoyable world to get into, between all of the theme and the items and the world and the fact that you're at different parts of the town, and it's really, really fun. I loved every single item I saw. All of them have personality. All of them are quirky and cool. And I fully recommend this game. This is a great game. Even in prototype form, which this is one of the best prototypes I've gotten, by the way. It's very well done. There is just so much game here. And it doesn't feel overwhelming. It's not a campaign game where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm only in chapter 3. There are 28 million chapters. I have 3,000 more hours to go before I'm done grinding through this, and we're going to be done 3 years. No, while it has that playability, it's in nice little bite-sized chunks that you get to do it in, and I really like that, because then you get to refresh. You know what, I'm going to try this strategy. I'm going to change this. You get that refresh. You get that change. You get that difference that I think is huge. So anyway, that's Townsfolk Tussle, if I could say the name right. Highly recommended. Enjoyed it a lot. I hope you enjoyed this very detailed review. If you did, if you appreciate the time it took to play the game, played enough to understand it, explain it to you in depth, in detail, so that you can make a better purchasing decision, please at least leave with a like. Let me know in a comment that was helpful. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask. I will be there. Panic Roll might be there. Who knows? But either way, thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys again very, very soon.